In this video, we'll quickly discuss factors. You might remember that I talked about factors a little bit when I introduced data structure in Module 2. We're going to pick up with factors again in our visualization modules, but I introduced them here with data transformation just in case some of you are working with data that has factor levels. So for example, if you're working with survey data, you probably are going to have factors with your data. The Tidyverse package that we use for factors is ForCats, and I love this one because I think the logo is extra cute. The main thing that you need to know is that factors are categorical variables that have a fixed and known set of possible values. So for example, you might have a survey with responses that range from 0 to 5, 0 being something like extremely unhappy, 3 neutral, and 5 extremely happy. There's only those 5 levels that can exist. And designating them as factors can make it easier to reorder and do other things like that. You can use the FCT factor function to compute levels if they're not already supplied. We'll discuss organizing factors, and like I said, we will pick up some of this in the visualization weeks. You can modify factor order using factor reorder, and this you want to make sure that you only use with non-ordinal data. You can move a certain factor to the beginning. So let's say you want to put other at the beginning, or maybe there's a level that is way higher than the rest. You want to put it at the beginning. You can do that. You can modify factor levels using factor recode. And you can manually collapse multiple levels into one, which I will show you in our script. And just as a reminder, in our next video, we'll cover the emissions example, which covers data transformation datetime data, and I explicitly wrote it for Challenge 3 help. So let's get to factors in our script. Here's a quick review from the R-Basics R script. Here we're going to create just a simple vector. I have a list of the different types of animals in my house. And I can create explicit factor levels. So you'll notice here that in my vector, I have rabbit, fish, snail, and guinea pig, but I also have shrimp because I have fish tanks. So the levels can include shrimp even if my data doesn't have it. All you do, use the factor function, pull in the vector, and then specify the levels. And we see here those levels listed out. For our example, we're going to follow Chapter 16 in R for Data Science, and I've pulled out the ones that don't involve visualization for the most part. We're going to pull in the GSS cat data. And this, if we check it out in our console, is data from the General Social Survey. So it's a sample of categorical variables, which you can see here. We have things like the year, age, and then a bunch of factors like marital status, party affiliation, and so on. Exercise 2 asks you to figure out the most common religious and party IDs in the survey. This is pretty easy. All we have to do is count and arrange. So here we see that by far the Protestants were the most commonly represented people in this survey, with 10,000 people reporting that they're Protestant and only 15 reporting that they don't know. And we can do the same thing with party ID. Not the vast majority, but the most are independent, and only one person didn't know how to respond. So the next question asks, which religion does denomination apply to? You can find out with a visualization, which we'll do in a few weeks, or we can again just find out with a table. And so here we see that denomination is overwhelmingly Protestant, and then it might make sense to lump some of these categories together. So we have 47 different rows. And we can do that using factor lump. So we'll check out the root function. This is a family for lumping together those different levels. We'll just run through a few. So the first is factor lump n. And this lumps all levels except for the n most frequent. And let's say we just want to specify 10. We want to group our data down to 10. Now we have Protestant, Catholic, and then down to Orthodox Christian. And about 458 get grouped into other. If you don't want to specify the number of levels, you can use factor lump lower frequency. So we're going to do this on denomination. And what this does is it lumps together the least frequent levels, ensuring that other is still the smallest level. So here, other, smallest level, and it turns out that there's 29 categories. So you can play around. There's no absolutely correct way to do this. It just depends on your data and your question. So again, with denomination, we can specify 10, and it's up to you to decide which makes the most sense. The last thing I'll leave you with is that we can recode the factor levels to change their names. So for example, I see here that in R income, there's a few different categories that essentially mean that there's no data. So not applicable, refused, there's don't know, and there's no answer. Maybe the distinction doesn't matter to you. To you, it's all just one group of no responses. Factor collapse can allow you to recode just one group. So what we can do is create a new column and use factor collapse. So no data equals all of these. Run that. And now you can see that we just have one example. And that makes it easier to filter out if you don't want that data. So again, this is just a quick run through of factors, but I hope it's helpful in case you are working with survey or other data that has factors as you transform it.